My phone buzzed in the middle of a routine work meeting, the kind of quiet vibration you normally ignore without thinking. But this one didn't stop. Another buzz followed. Then another. I glanced down and saw the notification from my home security app, motion detected in the driveway. That alone wasn't unusual. Delivery drivers, neighbors turning around, even the occasional stray dog wandering through the camera frame, it happened all the time. But when I opened the live feed, my stomach dropped. 2 tow trucks were parked in front of my house. For a second, I honestly thought I was looking at the wrong address. The camera angle shifted slightly in the wind, and there she was. Karen standing in my driveway like she owned the place. Clipboard tucked under her arm, sunglasses on, pointing at my cars while talking to the tow drivers with the kind of confidence that only comes from someone who thinks they can't be questioned. "Tow both of them," she said, loud enough for the camera mic to catch. My heart started pounding. Multiple cars violate the HOA policy. Since when? I knew the bylaws. I had read them twice. Something wasn't just wrong here. Something serious was about to happen. When I first moved into that neighborhood, I genuinely believed I had found the kind of place people imagine when they talk about peaceful suburban living. The lawns were perfectly trimmed, every mailbox matched, and the streets were so quiet you could hear birds instead of traffic. It looked organized, predictable, almost reassuring. After years of noisy apartments and unpredictable neighbors, the idea of living somewhere calm felt like a reward. The HOA didn't bother me at first. In fact, it seemed like part of the reason the place looked so orderly. Rules, I assumed, were just there to keep things fair. No abandoned cars on lawns, no neon paint on houses, basic stuff any reasonable adult could agree on. But it didn't take long before the whispers started. The first warning came from a neighbor across the street while we were both collecting mail. He leaned in slightly, lowered his voice, and asked if I had met the HOA president yet. When I said no, he gave a small, almost nervous laugh and said, "You will." Then he said the name. Karen. Apparently, she ran the HOA meetings like a courtroom and treated minor issues like criminal investigations. I remember shrugging it off. Every neighborhood has someone dramatic, right? I figured people were exaggerating. Looking back now, I realized those quiet warnings weren't gossip. They were survival tips I didn't understand yet. The first real confrontation happened at my second HOA meeting. I only went because I thought it was the responsible thing to do as a new homeowner. Show up, listen, maybe vote on a landscaping proposal, then head home. Nothing dramatic. Just community housekeeping. The room was quiet, filled with that strange politeness people adopt when they're sitting in folding chairs, pretending they care about fence colors and trash bin placement. Karen sat at the front behind a long table, clipboard in hand, scanning the room like a teacher looking for someone to call on. When the meeting ended, I stood up and reached into my pocket for my keys. 3 key fobs clinked together as I grabbed them. It was a small sound barely noticeable in any other situation, but Karen's head snapped toward me as she had just heard an alarm. Her eyes dropped to the keys, then slowly lifted back to my face. After the room cleared out, she walked straight toward me with a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You have multiple vehicles?" she asked. I nodded casually and said something like, "Yeah, cars are kind of a hobby." Her expression hardened immediately. She said owning that many cars was selfish, that it created unnecessary environmental strain and disrupted the balance of the neighborhood. I actually laughed, thinking it had to be a joke. It wasn't. Her voice went flat as she leaned a little closer and quietly said that community harmony required cooperation. The message wasn't loud, but the meaning was clear. Outside, one neighbor caught my arm and whispered something that stuck with me. "Don't push back," he said softly. "Karen likes picking targets." 2 days after that meeting, the first letter arrived. It was slipped neatly into my mailbox inside an official-looking HOA envelope with the community logo printed across the top. At first glance, it looked routine, the kind of administrative notice every homeowner probably received at some point, but the moment I started reading, something felt off. According to Karen's letter, my vehicles were creating what she called community disruption. The document claimed the number of cars in my driveway increased environmental strain, created visual clutter, and even caused psychological pressure on nearby residents. I read that sentence twice, wondering if it was some strange joke. Psychological pressure from parked cars. Instead of reacting immediately, I did what anyone logical would do. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and read them carefully. Then I read them again. Page after page listed rules about lawn maintenance, trash collection days, fence heights, and exterior paint colors. But nowhere, literally nowhere, was there any rule limiting how many cars a homeowner could own or park in their driveway. I assumed once Karen realized that, the situation would quietly disappear. It didn't. 4 days later, another notice appeared, this one labeled a warning. Then came a citation for visual clutter, then a fine for improper vehicle display, whatever that meant. The amounts weren't huge, but they arrived with increasing frequency, sometimes daily. Soon, Karen started scheduling inspection visits, always when I wasn't home. Neighbors who used to wave began avoiding eye contact. One even crossed the street rather than walk past my driveway. That was the moment it finally clicked. This wasn't about rules anymore. Karen wasn't enforcing policy. She was building pressure, one notice at a time, until compliance felt easier than resistance. The breaking point came on a completely ordinary workday. I was halfway through answering emails when my phone started buzzing again, with notifications from the security cameras at home. At first, I assumed it was another routine inspection from Karen, the kind she liked to conduct when I wasn't around. But when I opened the live feed, the image on the screen made my chest tighten. Karen was standing in my driveway again. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 tow trucks were parked at the curb with their engines running. Karen stood between them, holding her clipboard, pointing directly at my cars while speaking with the drivers. Even through the camera's audio, I could hear the certainty in her voice as she explained that the vehicles were violating HOA policy and needed to be removed immediately. One of the drivers hesitated, clearly unsure. Karen responded by saying she was acting on behalf of the HOA board and that the situation had already been documented. Then things got worse. When the drivers couldn't access one of the cars, Karen walked straight to my garage door. A moment later, the camera shook slightly as the door jerked open with more force than it should have needed. The frame bent awkwardly, the metal twisting as the lock gave way. By the time I raced home, the street looked quiet again. Too quiet. 2 empty spaces sat in my driveway, and the garage door hung crooked. Across the street, curtains shifted as neighbors watched without saying a word. I didn't waste time wondering where the cars had gone. I walked straight to Karen's house and knocked harder than I probably needed to. She opened the door with that same calm expression she always wore during HOA meetings, like nothing unusual had happened that day. When I asked her where my cars were, she tilted her head slightly and said she had no idea what I was talking about. According to her, maybe I had moved them myself and forgotten. For a second, I just stared at her, trying to decide if she actually believed that would work. Then I pulled out my phone and called the police. When the officers arrived, Karen switched her tone immediately. She greeted them politely, explaining that sometimes new homeowners misunderstood community policies. But the moment I showed them the security footage, the entire atmosphere shifted. The video clearly showed her standing in my driveway directing the tow trucks, then forcing the garage door open when access became a problem. Karen tried to recover by saying she had acted for the good of the community and that the HOA board supported her decision. One officer watched the video again and slowly shook his head. He explained that whatever authority she thought she had, ordering vehicles removed and breaking into someone's property crossed a very different line entirely. The arrest itself wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches or neighborhood crowds gathering on the sidewalk. It was quiet and procedural. The officers spoke with Karen for several minutes while reviewing the footage again, and then they calmly informed her that she was being detained while the situation was investigated further. Watching her confident posture slowly collapse into disbelief was strange. Just hours earlier, she had been standing in my driveway issuing orders like she owned the entire neighborhood. The charges came quickly after that: unlawful towing, property damage, illegal entry, and abuse of authority. Once the case reached court, the evidence left very little room for debate. The security footage showed everything clearly, from her directing the tow trucks to forcing the garage door open. She was removed from the HOA board almost immediately. The court ordered her to cover the repair costs, towing damages, and legal fees, adding up to thousands of dollars. Soon, the HOA began reviewing every decision she had made during her time in power. In the end, it turned out Karen's biggest mistake wasn't my cars. It was believed control meant immunity. Looking back, the whole situation still feels surreal. All of it started because someone believed they had the right to control something that was never theirs to control. But I'm curious what you think. Did Karen deserve the consequences she faced, or did things go too far? Let me know what you think.